Yeah, what's up, everybody? I'm Chris Dailey, joined here by Damon Amendolara. I looked it up probably countless times on how to pronounce your last name, so maybe that's why you go by DA. So, anyways, DA, thank you for joining the show.
My pleasure, Chris. And you're right, Amendolara is way harder than Daly. There's a lot of people much older than you, much more experienced in the broadcast realm that still get it wrong as well.
Yeah.
So that's why DA works for a lot of people. You can't mispronounce DA.
Yeah, and it's funny because I always thought you were like Amendola, so I looked up a few years ago. I remember looking up is Danny Amendola he used to be on the Patriots, and are you guys related? But turns out had different last names, so it's easy to see that one right there.
Yeah, we have two letters that are different. He's Amendola, and then you would add an R-A on the end of his name to get to Amendolara. So
yeah.
I am two letters longer than Danny Amendola.
Yeah, so yeah, you're a New York kid, growing up in New York. Was sportscasting always your dream as a kid? Because I saw you did a project as a senior with Mike Francesco, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, when I was growing up and I was maybe 10 or 11 years old, I realized that I loved sports. I was always into watching sports and collecting baseball and football cards and reading as many sports books as possible. So I was always into it, and I kind of felt like, man, if I ever get a job and it was in sports, that would be really cool. It wasn't really until I was in high school that I felt like, oh, maybe this actually could be a career. I remember we had a career day in my high school. I went to Warwick High School, which is in Warwick, New York, Orange County, New York, and there was somebody from NBC that came in. He wasn't on air, but he talked about working in television. And I said, boy, that would be really amazing to work in television and to work in sports television. And then when I was in high school, I started doing local broadcasting for my local high school team, the Warwick High School Wildcats. I did cable access games for them. And so I would broadcast the games, announce the games, and then put it on, give it to them on cable access, and they would air it. And then I started going, oh, behind the microphone is something that I really like doing. And so that kind of was one thing that led to another. That piece that you saw, which is on YouTube, was from my high school communications class, which also helped me develop a little bit of the techniques that I would need, the skill set being behind a microphone, understanding how equipment works. And then I went to college for broadcasting. So it was little steps all along the way, but from a pretty early age, I knew that being around sports was something that I really dreamed about being as a career.
Yeah, and you went to a big school in Syracuse, which is actually known for journalism. If you look it up, it's always at the top of almost every single list because of the long list of names. And then you have added yourself to that list. So it's safe to say you've had a storied career. But what do you think separates Syracuse's program compared to other programs?
So you're already ahead of a lot of us because at your age you're already doing broadcasting and interviewing, big time athletes like Saquon Barkley and others. And I can tell you personally, you're ahead of where I was as well, because when I was 14, I didn't realize Syracuse was kind of the gold standard of broadcasting in many ways. But when I started doing research about where I wanted to go to school, I really looked at communications schools. I wanted to go to a place that had a good communications program so that I was around, people that wanted to do it, and I was around a department that would support me. And I looked at a lot of great schools in the Northeast, and I looked at a lot of great schools, all around the New York area and the Northeast. And I went to Syracuse, and it was cold, and it was raining. And I remember saying to my mom, I don't know, this is not the weather that I grew up watching movies about college and thinking about beautiful green quads and historic buildings. And I just said, I don't know. And we went into the communications house, which is the new house. We went into the communications building, and we went to the student radio station. And at the student radio station, WAER, they had pictures of all of the broadcasters on the wall that had come before. And in Newhouse, they had pictures of so many people that had come before as well, broadcasters and journalists. when I saw the list, I said, man, if everybody here has done this, there's some secret sauce here. And if they were able to accomplish it, maybe I would be able to accomplish it. Maybe I would be good enough to be on that wall one day. And, I came back to my high school communications teacher. He said, have you decided where to go yet? And I said, well, I haven't, but I just took a visit to Syracuse. I looked at Hofstra. I looked at Ithaca. I looked at Temple. I looked at a lot of schools that had Fordham, good communications programs in the Northeast. And she said, but you got into Newhouse, right? I said, yeah, I did. She goes, well, we've never had a student at Warwick High get into Newhouse. And I thought to myself, well, am I going to pass on that opportunity? Am I going to be the guy that actually got in and I didn't even, walk that path? So that ended up being the reason why. And then I went there and I was so happy. And you asked the question, what do I think separates Syracuse? What I think separates Syracuse is that you have so many young people that go there with that dream. Mm-hmm. And when you have that many young people that go there with that dream, it's really highly competitive, and it's hard to get on the air, and it's hard to cut your teeth, and it's hard to be. It's impossible to be a star there because everybody is so good, and that made me so much better because I really wasn't on the air for the first year and a half that I was there. I was learning, and I was writing, and I was practicing, and without that competition, without people driving me to be better, I don't think I could have been where I am. And it all started there because when you have that expectation as a young person and people around you are driving to be better, it forces you to be better. And I think that's the secret to why so many people come out of SU and are so successful.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people, I don't know a lot, but I've heard of a lot of people that went there, and the voice of basketball went there. I think Mike Tirico went there, so it has a great history. After Syracuse, you actually go to the Rochester Rhinos among a few other teams. And the Rochester Rhinos, I'm a big soccer fan. I know you are because I've seen a bunch of your Nomad stuff. Rochester Rhinos are a very famous team. They won the U.S. Open Cup, which would be like a huge tournament between all the AAA teams with MLB and a AAA team winning it. So that's what it would be like if you don't understand how big that is. So what was it like for you? Because I'm very interested in hearing what was it like working with the Rhinos kind of at their peak?
No, well, Chris, I'm forever indebted to you because you know your soccer and you know the Rhinos, and I'm so impressed with you.
Thank you.
Because, to be frank, I'm a big soccer fan, but before I got the job, I really didn't know anything about the Rochester Rhinos. I was up at Syracuse during the summer between my junior and senior year, and I was going to stay up there to work for the student radio station, but it wasn't going to consume all of my days, all of my hours, so I knew I had other time to delve into a different project. And I started calling some of the sports radio stations to make the drive, and that's about an hour and 15 minutes away, but I was happy to do whatever I could to be in the business. And they said, well, it just so happens that coming up this summer, we're going to broadcast soccer games. We do this every year, soccer games on WYSL 1040 in Rochester. And they said we could actually use a pregame and postgame post. We're kind of expanding the coverage. And I said, I'm in. I'm a big soccer fan. I would love to do it. That sounds amazing. And I really didn't know what to expect. I never really heard soccer on the radio. This was the summer of 2000. So I really didn't know what to expect, and I had never heard of the Rhinos before, but I was given a job, and I said, yeah, I'm going to do it. And when I got there and I saw the Rhinos are an institution in Rochester. Rochester's a wonderful soccer community. And they were getting on average 9,000 fans to an A-League soccer game. Now, to think about this is the infancy of the MLS. We didn't even really have an established MLS at the time.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So to get 9,000 people for the division under MLS in Rochester for these games was amazing, but it was fun and it was exciting and it was raucous, and I was just so thrilled to be part of it. And I did pregame and postgame for them the entire season. They ended up winning the A-League that year, which was super cool. They claimed to fame, as you said, the U.S. Open Cup championship. So they were a big deal, and they were part of the community. And I got to do that summer going into the fall because they went all the way through the playoffs. So I was doing it in September, maybe even October. And then, that was kind of a one-year thing because I graduated college in the spring of 2001, and they didn't really need my help anymore. And so then I began sending out tapes, and it just so happened that the guy that hired me in Rochester had moved down to Fort Myers, Florida, to do a sports radio station down there, to do a sports talk show, and I became his producer. My first job was becoming his producer, behind the scenes and doing some update work for him.
Jeez.
So it's funny how those things spin together, but the Rochester Rhinos was the start of my career.
Yeah, and it's crazy because you're kind of like at the point where you're not old enough to know like the NASL kind of, just got born right when that ended, but you're not young enough to kind of grow up like me with the MLS and everything. And to me, there's like the post-Beckham and the pre-Beckham. So I'm in the post-Beckham era, but I mean, before David Beckham really came to America, soccer was kind of, it's like, should I go to this? And what I found funny was I was watching an old MLS Cup game, and it was like 2000, I couldn't tell you, maybe 2007, and the Columbus Crew were in it. That's all I remember. But their stadium was in it, but not the actual team. Because now it's like the team who is it, like the highest, they have the most points. I went to one in Atlanta because I won like tickets to go there. And it was crazy because Atlanta plays in their own stadium. The team that's better plays. But back in the day, it's like they didn't, and nobody would go. Only 300 fans would go because people aren't going to pay to travel around the whole country to watch a team play. So I think they made the right move by changing stadiums because I'm watching it, and I'm like, why is nobody at the MLS Cup final? But it's because it was, let's just say, New England versus LA in Columbus.
You're absolutely right, Chris. And when you think about it, it was played in terrible weather. It's always been played in terrible weather. The MLS season is different than European soccer. European soccer and international soccer usually ends in the spring, early summer, and then they take the summer off. But MLS didn't want to compete with international soccer, and also didn't want to compete with anything but the summer here in the U.S. We kind of have a dead time for sports in the summer, so they want to take advantage of that. So when they began the league back in '96, they said, let's be a summer sport. But that means that your championship game is late November or early December. So their whole idea was MLS Cup was going to be like the Super Bowl. It's going to be a neutral site. We're going to have all the fans travel to the Super Bowl. So we're going to set that neutral site up years in advance. Well, as you said, it didn't really work because it's a young league. The fans aren't used to traveling for a big match, and it's being played in the middle of the winter, and you're outdoors. So attendance was a problem. Eventually, they made the switch, as you said, to the home stadium, and that's been a huge difference.
Yeah.
But MLS is also a really well-run league these days, and they went through their early problems and hiccups. But boy, right now, as you said, I would say the David Beckham line is a good line, a benchmark for that league, and now they are kicking butt.
Yeah, and I'm a New York guy, well, Jersey, so I've always supported the Red Bulls because, and now it's kind of, I'm not saying like kind of trying to bash the Red Bulls management here, but they used to put so much money and like invest into the team, but now they got these two teams in Europe that are like in the Champions League making all the money. So it's like, all right, Red Bulls, like New York, we don't care about you anymore. Because back in the day, they used to have like Thierry Henry, Timmy Cahill, all these guys that I loved watching, and now we don't have that, but it's all right.
You really are an encyclopedia. You're amazing, Chris. This is awesome.
Yeah.
I love how much soccer
Thanks.
knowledge you have, and you're absolutely right. The Red Bulls try to make that splash. They kind of try to buy an MLS championship, if you will, bringing in Thierry Henry, Cahill, etc. They had some really good seasons, a lot of early exits in the playoffs, couldn't quite hang that MLS Cup banner, and now they're doing more of a developmental approach, and I think it's working. They've developed some amazing players. Tyler Adams was a big one.
I met Tyler Adams one time. That was pretty cool, and he's a very nice guy, and he was like 18, and my dad's like, he's 18 and plays professional sports, because not many Americans are used to these kids playing. But, I mean, soccer, I see kids making debuts at like 16 overseas, so it's pretty funny.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. Adams is he's a great guy. He's a great young man. He's playing overseas now, and he was developed through the Red Bull system, and, boy, he's a good one.
Yeah, and now back on track here. Like, you mentioned about Florida, and the thing I love about you is persistence, because I'm reading about you, and it's kind of like you work years under the radar, and, obviously you finally get your big chance. So you come to Boston eventually throughout the line, and you work NBC Boston, I'm pretty sure. Have you ever, like, met Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, and, I mean, to kind of talk about that experience doing it for the best team in the whole league?
Yeah, my career was always it was small steps, little by little by little. And after Fort Myers, when I was there as a producer, then they made me a fill-in host, and then they gave me a full-time slot as a host every day on the air. So that was a big deal to me. Then I left there to go to Kansas City to be the night show host.
Yes.
And that was a big deal to go to Kansas City and to work in a professional sports town. Talk about the Chiefs and the Royals. And from nights, they moved me to mornings in Kansas City, and that was another little step up for me. And then I left Kansas City to go to Miami, and that was a bigger market, and I got to talk about, a four-sport town where they had all four professional sports, and that was kind of a goal of mine. And then after Miami in the summer of 2009, they were flipping the signal 98.5 FM in Boston to an all-sports station, and they were going to try to rival and challenge the existing sports radio station, WEEI, who had been there forever. And they called me and they asked me, if I would like to do the nights. And it was a little intimidating at first because I knew that in Boston, if you're not from Boston, they're going to have a bit of a tough time trusting you, and especially as a native New Yorker, oh my goodness.
Gosh.
But the bosses thought that I could do a good job, and that gave me some confidence that I could do it. And it's such an amazing sports town that I said I want to try it. I mean, I would be silly not to try it. So I began doing nights in August of 2009 in Boston, and that was through a series of small steps. I feel like that was my biggest step. That I went to a place that was so big in sports and so intense, and then the success of the radio station put a spotlight on me. That because we did so well as a top-to-bottom radio station and really challenged WEEI and won some ratings books, we also had the rights of the Patriots and the rights of the Bruins, that it put me on the map in a lot of ways within the industry and maybe nationally as well. And that helped lead to that job, as you were mentioning, doing pregame and postgame on TV for Comcast Sportsnet New England, which is now NBC Sports Boston, around the Patriots. And I never had a chance to singularly, meet Belichick and Brady, but I was in their press to ask them questions, and I did have conversations with them in that way. But I never met them one-on-one. But it was a real academic experience for me, because I got to be on the inside of the most dominant organization of the last 20 years in the NFL, because being at Gillette Stadium and being in the locker room and understanding how they did things and why they did things gave me a real sense of why they are so great. And that list is very long, but it was a real amazing experience. And then Boston, because it was so successful and because the show was very well received, it helped lead me to CBS Sports Radio, because
all those fans there.
Yeah, you're right on it in terms of a soccer-specific stadium. When I was there in 2009, and I guess I did their sideline in 2010, 11, and 12, I think it was, so I did it for 3 seasons. Every year we asked, when is the soccer-specific stadium going to come? Is it on the horizon? There's always been these reports, and look, that's now almost 8 years ago that I was there last. So it still hasn't happened. I think that town will explode with Revs' passion when they do get a soccer-specific stadium. Not that the Revs would ever end up being bigger than the Patriots or the Red Sox, the Celtics, the Bruins, but it would put them on that conversation, because
it would make it
a downtown, especially if it was off the tee, so kids could get to a big college town. Young people are into MLS and soccer. It would create this unbelievable atmosphere, and then people would be drawn to go be part of the atmosphere. It has happened all across MLS. I mean, you go to Minnesota, you go to Orlando, you go to Atlanta, you go to LAFC. Go down the list. When there is a passionate soccer stadium and experience, people are drawn to it, and it's important and it matters. That will happen when the Revs do get that soccer-specific stadium, but it's hard to build a stadium in Boston. They haven't found the right fit yet, but I think you're right. If they do it, they're going to light the match, and it's going to be big time.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, it's like they're playing in it. I don't know how big Gillette Stadium by the numbers, but it's obviously exceeding 70,000. Let's just say that. And obviously they're not filling that. And I interviewed a guy like a year ago, and he plays for some small, like, third division team, and he said, because Forward Madison, they're making, like, a big wave. They got these great fans, crazy jerseys, and, like, their marketing team is genius. And he said, I'd rather play in a small packed stadium than a huge empty one. So it's also like appearance of eye. Like if you see the Revolution on a picture and it's like, oh, nobody's there. There's actually a few thousand people there. It's just they're playing in such a huge stadium, it looks like nobody's there. So they gotta have, maybe move to another stadium that's smaller, not soccer specific, but we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, you're right. Because
Yeah.
if you have, let's just say the Revs get about 10,000 fans a game. 10,000 fans inside a 12,000 seat stadium feels
Yeah.
big and cool, and you'll be able to get the next 3,000 fans because it's going to feel like an event. But if you put 10,000 fans inside a 70,000 seat stadium, it doesn't feel like it's an important event. It doesn't feel like you need to be there. So it's hard to get that extra 3,000 to 4,000 people. So you're right. It's a chicken or the egg. You've got to convince people that is important to make it an important event to be at.
Yeah, now people hate on me because I say going to a game in a baseball stadium is actually fun because I went to a NYCFC one, but it was actually pretty cool because I walk up, I could pretty much touch the field. But they've actually been trying to get a soccer-specific stadium, because the mayor always shuts it down. Unlike I feel like in Boston, they're not even trying. They're kind of happy with the way they are. I know the Patriots are great, so it's definitely not the biggest of their issues. Maybe the biggest of their issues is trying to find a quarterback for this season.
That's probably true. And remember, they own Gillette Stadium as well. They built that stadium.
Yeah.
So the Revs essentially play rent-free, lease-free when it comes to in that stadium. So they need to get maybe the perfect deal to finally make it make sense for them.
Yeah, and now we all know you're this huge radio becoming of an icon. So you're almost, I'd say you're at that status. I've known you for years. What's the biggest misconception about being on radio?
Well, you're making me blush, Chris. I don't know if I can consider myself anywhere close to an icon, but I do think in radio it fits my personality because I really love a personal bond with people. I love to listen to them. I love to understand them. I love to ask questions about them. And it's a very intimate friendship that you have when it comes to listeners in radio. They're with you every single day for hours on end. It's very different than television, where if you see an analyst on TV for once a week during games, or you see them just during games and they're just talking about the games, or you see them on TV and they do a half-hour panelist show or something, you're usually not brought into their lives. But in radio, everybody's brought into your life because you're there every day in their lives. And they're driving to work with you, and they're listening to you in the shower, or they're listening to you when they get ready for work, or they listen to you at work. You're with them during their day. And it fits my personality because I feel a very close bond with people that are in my circle. So radio has always fit my personality, and also it's scratched the itch of my creativity. There's not a lot of places that I could do the things that I want to do with my brain the way that it works, except radio. I get 4 hours a day to just create. And if anybody's listened to the show, they've heard me reference it as the mothership. And the reason that is because I love old school 70s funk. And one of the greatest funk bands of all time is Parliament Funkadelic, who used to land a spaceship on their stage and invite everybody into the intergalactic party. And I just said, this is the perfect metaphor for the way I want to do a radio show. Everybody is invited, and we're spinning through the universe, inviting everybody into this sports talk party. And there's just not a lot of places that you can do that besides radio. It's kind of theater of the mind. Mm-hmm. So I hope, if anybody looked at my show and said, oh, it works because of this, I think it's a really earnest bond that I have with my listeners. And I think it sounds different because it's really creative, and CBS allows me to be really creative, so it doesn't sound like your normal sports talk radio show. And that matters to me because I never wanted to get into this and be the same. I said, if I'm going to do this, I want to be different. I want to be unique. I want to be cut from a different cloth. I'm a different type of guy anyway in a lot of ways, my sense of humor, my personality, my interests. So I like the idea of being different. I've always embraced that. I remember when I was a kid, probably a little younger than you, I had a girl in my class who was trying to make fun of me. I probably was, maybe I was 9 years old or so. And she said, "You're so weird." And I was like, is that a put down? Yeah, I like being weird. That's who I am. And I always thought that was so funny because so many people don't want to be weird. And I was always like, yeah, it's who I am. I like being weird. That's a compliment to me. So being weird and having the radio show that sounds different has always been very attractive to me.
Yeah, that's cool, and that's pretty funny. So, and I also saw, like, there was a running gag on one of your shows. I think it was the one in Florida. Like, you coached a local youth soccer team, and they, like, finished last, and then everybody joked about that. And so I found that pretty funny. So, like, what show was that on?
That's right. I was in Miami. You're really digging into the archives. You've done your homework here, Chris.
Thank you.
I was living in Miami, and I was doing the night show for WQAM in Miami, and I had all this time at my disposal because I was only working 3 hours a night, and it was only at nights, and I was single at the time. And I said, boy, I really want to be part of soccer, and I love, coaching kids and being around camps and, youth, kind of like hospitals, and we've done a lot with the show with young people with charities, and I was a big brother and big brother's big sister, so I always liked being around kids and kind of being part of that. And I said I should just coach a soccer team. So I ended up coaching the soccer team, and this is such a funny story, is that in South Florida, as you might imagine, it's super competitive at every level. I was coaching, I believe it was 9 and 10-year-olds, so it's super competitive. So I figured out, walk into this league, and we'll be fine, and we'll win a couple of games. We'll have some fun. I'm going to play a lot of offense, maybe not a lot of defense, but, if we win 6-5 or lose, 7-6, that's all good. And my team got smashed all the time. We got just pounded by everybody. And I was like, what is going on? Why are we so bad? Am I this bad as a coach? I mean, it's only 9-year-old soccer here. What I didn't realize was, because it's so competitive and I was the new coach on the block, they gave me all of the last players in the league. All of the rest of the teams drafted all of their players, and then they just gave me all the kids that nobody else wanted. So I was basically coaching the Bad News Bears. We lost every game. And also the coaches were very serious about everything. 6-0. We lost 7-1. The usual every week. And they said, you wouldn't believe it. You should have been here. We won. I said, we won the only game that I didn't coach. I didn't coach the rest of the year. We lost every game. We coached the playoffs, and we lost a heartbreaking 1-goal game as well. So I think my official coaching record is like 0-11 or 0-11-1 or something. And my team's one win in that season was when I missed the game, and it became a running gag on the radio show that when I don't coach is when we win.
That's hilarious. So it's funny, and you're also on NFL Network, which is really, really cool. But now that I'm thinking of it, that's just like they give you all these players that they didn't draft, which is just crazy. But so you're also on NFL Network. That's how in the beginning I said like I kind of found you and heard of you. When was like the first moment you joined NFL Network? Is it like full time? Do they just ask you like how does that work?
Well, I was working in Miami as I was just talking about that story, and when I was there, I had left Kansas City, and they were starting this series, the Top 10 series for NFL Network, and so this must have been 2010 or something like that.
Yeah.
And they reached out to me. They said, I actually knew a producer that was working there because I had interned for him when I was in college. Since I was doing so much experience on student radio, I figured to help flesh out my experience, I wanted to do internships in television. So I interned at a couple of TV stations, local TV, working in the sports department, doing research and some editing and some just behind-the-scenes type of stuff for them. And one of those producers ended up at NFL Network. So he called me up and he says, and we kept in contact every so often over the years, but he said, I know that you were working in Kansas City, and we're doing top 10 playoff chokes, I believe it was.
I watched that one, yeah.
Good episode.
Yeah.
They said, we're doing the Lynn Elliott game. The Lynn Elliott game is 1995. The Kansas City Chiefs are the number 1 seed in the AFC. They're 13-3, and they're hosting the Cinderella Indianapolis Colts in the divisional round. And I think the Colts that year were 9-7 or 10-6. They had just made the playoffs, and they were an upstart. There was no way they were going to beat the Chiefs. And they end up beating the Chiefs 9-7. And Lynn Elliott, the kicker of the Chiefs, missed 3 field goals that day. So had he made 1, they would have won. And this was another flame out for the Chiefs back before they won a Super Bowl. So we said, we don't have any contacts in Kansas City. Would you be able to talk about the Lynn Elliott game, even though you work in Miami? I said, sure, yeah, of course I can do that. So this is very funny. They set up their shoot in Miami at at either a golf course or at a hotel. And I said, that's great. Let me know when, where. I'm happy to do it. And I got there, and they asked me about the Lynn Elliott game, so I gave them my thoughts on it. They said, that was great. Thanks so much. So on my way out, I said, just as a question, who else have you interviewed? And they said, so far it's been Don Shula and Isaac Bruce. And I'm like, whoa, those are two Hall of Famers, and me? What is going on? Are you kidding me? And from just taping that one episode for that one number, it was whatever number it was. So it was one of the top 10 in one episode. He said, DA is pretty good at telling stories. He knows his NFL history. Maybe next year we'll have him on some more to talk about it. So the next year, the series was very successful, and they started asking me to do more episodes and more takes. And so then it just grew into, we'll ask DA about every one of these things, and we'll just use what we think is funny or interesting. And so I don't officially work for NFL Network, but they use me every year as part of their Top 10 series. And they run that Top 10 show constantly. So
I know, it's always on.
Yeah, you'll see me from 10 years ago doing episodes when I was living in Miami, episodes when I was living in Boston, episodes when I was living in New York. It's like the last 10 years of my career has been captured on film doing these. Yeah. And they air all of the time.
Yeah, and it's funny because, people ask me, how do you not get, starstruck when you, meet Shaq or, meet Saquon? And I'm like, well, they're just, regular guys after all. They're just, just like me and you, except they're pretty good at, football and basketball. But for you, it's like, I haven't seen you my whole life, so I'm like, wow, I'm talking to, the guy I've seen every night before I went to sleep for the past 5 years. This is crazy. But, so it's actually pretty funny doing this. And I had something I wanted to say now. Just went right by my mind. It's something about NFL Network. But anyways, yeah, so on YouTube, you host a Nomad Series where you go around all around the globe, actually, and you go to places. I know you went to Peru. I watched that one for a soccer game. I'm trying to think. You went to the 2017 Final Four. I watched that. So you've been to all these places. What's been the most interesting place you've been to so far?
Well, as a big soccer fan, I got to go to Peru, as you mentioned. Got to see a couple of matches there, and I got to see a couple matches in the Premier League when I went to London last year. My wife, for my 40th birthday, she knew that I always wanted to see a Premier League game, and she said, "For your 40th birthday, I'm going to buy a trip to London. This is why my wife is the best." So we went, and I got to see Arsenal at Liverpool at Anfield, which was just a dream come true. Then I got to see Tottenham play at home in their brand new stadium, which was amazing as well. And to see those two stadiums, one which is really old, one which is really new, was awesome. Now, I have not put out those Nomads yet. I've been kind of waiting to see when the pandemic wraps up and things kind of get back to normal to release some of the Nomad episodes that I have still in the can. So that was a really special thing. But I'm also a huge college football fan. And one of the most memorable places that I've ever gone to in my life was Neyland Stadium, Rocky Top, for a Tennessee football game. And I say that because nobody kind of knew me from a hole in the wall, but a friend of mine helped set me up for the athletic department to get a pair of tickets, and they gave me a sideline pass. And when you go to a football stadium, you sit on the sideline or stand on the sideline, and there's 100,000 people there. And they're all wearing orange or white, and they're chanting and cheering on a fall Saturday. And I was able to climb to the top of the stadium and then come back down and watch it from the field and see the band and to see the players at full speed. And the community around college football, it was so special. It was so special. And I tied that into doing a hike in the Rocky Mountains. The Smoky Mountains. And like I was a friend. And to have this access to a big-time sporting event, one that I really loved, that it was like one of those wow. And so there's multiple episodes of Nomad about this trip. One is the actual game itself. One is hiking through the Smoky Mountains. And one is the practice facility that I got to go see. There was a Peyton Manning room. And this is a room that is decked out in all awesome old school Tennessee sports memorabilia, including Peyton Manning memorabilia, and it overlooks the practice field. So to be in there, it felt like I was in some type of special, secret place that only the VIPs could get into for college football. And so I just loved it. So there's a couple of trips that I've taken that were just so special. And the Nomad Series kind of documents that, and I've had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, in Atlanta, I was actually wearing this sweatshirt, but then I had to put on a nice polo. But
there you go.
College Football Hall of Fame in Atlanta, that was one of the most surreal experiences. I also got to take some field goals, and I'm a soccer player, so it was pretty cool to know I can kick a football too. And now that you mentioned Peyton Manning, it comes across my mind what I was going to say. Sammy Baugh played in the 1940s. I'm sure you probably heard of him before. And I said in a post yesterday, he's the best football player to ever grace the planet because he played quarterback, safety, and punter. And he was the best in his generation at all three. I mean, in one game he had like 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. And I said, you may say Manning, Brady, Montana, any of those 3 are better quarterbacks. I'll say, okay, yeah, you have a point. But you can't say any football player is better than Sammy Baugh. And then my dad's like, who's he? My brother's like, oh, take this down. I'm going to have to unfollow you. But, yeah, so I think the whole point of the post was...
Great. You got to do your research, and then you got to have some hot takes, and that's one of the hot takes. I like it. I mean, you got the stats to back it up here. Sammy Baugh, as you said, was the best quarterback of his era. He was probably the best quarterback in NFL history up until Johnny Unitas came along in the 50s and 60s. He also was an elite safety, as you said, and he was the best punter in the NFL. So now just imagine Tom Brady not only being Tom Brady, but also, playing safety for the Patriots and intercepting like 6 passes a game and being the best punter in the NFL. That's how dominant Sammy Baugh was.
Yeah, and in 1943, he won a championship. He led the league in average yards per punt and interceptions, as he was also a punter and safety. That's what I put in my post. And his nickname's
Texas Tech. I love it.
Yeah, maybe he's the next coming. Imagine that MVP, because now we have all these, obviously one-positional guys. Back in the day, everybody played everything. So imagine Logan Green comes, safety, punter, quarterback. Yeah, he's still taken in the 2nd overall pick.
Right.
Somehow, some way, he'll find a way to fall to the 3rd round. But so on CBS, we all know this COVID-19 pandemic has been impacting us all. How has CBS adjusted, especially for your show, to kind of make sure you guys are healthy and safe while continuing the radio show?
Well, we've had to break apart and do it from our homes for the most part. Now, we have an engineer at the studio, and we have very limited staffing back at the studio to run the show, but most of it is run out of our homes. You can see the backdrop. The producer did as well. My update anchor did as well. And so we were kind of split across 4 different destinations, 3 homes in the studio. But I give CBS a lot of credit because we, along with a lot of other radio networks, have figured out how to pull it off. I think if you listen to the radio show today, I don't think you would notice that it's not from a radio studio or a network station. I think it sounds pretty seamless, and that comes from 5 months of working on it. We had to tweak this, tweak that. But for the most part, I think we've done a good job, and that is a testament to how hard everybody has worked. It's a testament to everybody wanting it to sound normal. And, when the pandemic started back in March, our first episodes, I was like, I don't want anybody even talking about the pandemic because I don't want people to listen to the radio and be distracted by thinking that we're not doing the show that we used to do. This needs to be a haven for people. This needs to be some normalcy when everything else is out of whack. They're listening to the same show they've listened to for the last 7.5 years on CBS Sports Radio. I want it to just be a safe zone. Now, as the pandemic has, unfolded, it's impossible not to talk about your life. It's impossible not to talk about how it affects sports every single day. So we've adjusted to how the conversation needs to go. But I think today, if you just listened on the radio and you closed your eyes, I don't think you would really be able to tell that we're doing it from home. And I'm very proud of that because I never wanted it to seem like it was less of a show just because we weren't doing it in the network.
Yeah, it's cool. And that's actually a really great response. Like, I probably didn't even think about that, but I know people have said, like, they've tried to been fine what's no more in their lives during the pandemic. So I know obviously family is the big one. Have an immediate family, because if you have extended family, it's hard to see them. But anyways, I have some rapid fire questions for you, and this has been a very fun interview. I should get a bit more fun here, but I like it because not just obviously talking about a lot about your career and also about sports at the same time. So it's been pretty fun and interactive for me, and then hopefully for the people watching this interview. Let's hope. So, anyways,
Absolutely. You've done an amazing job, Chris. I mean,
thank
I'm
you.
telling you, you've been out of this world good. So I've really enjoyed doing it.
Thank you. Yeah. And now, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Well, from a pretty early stage, just realized say yes to everything that you can in this industry, because it's going to open up a lot of doors. Your attitude says a lot. So if you tell everybody, yeah, I can do it. Yeah, I'm willing to do it. Yes, that's not beneath me. It goes a long way. So say yes to everything in the industry is something that I constantly encourage young people to do.
Yeah. And now, what's the worst piece of advice you've ever received? I always ask people.
Probably don't take that job. Probably don't do that. I mean, yeah, there's good fits for everybody, but like I said, I think keeping your mind open, your heart open, and your spirit available to what the next thing is really important, because the industry is filled with people who recognize you. You're on the radio. You become in the media world a bit of a celebrity if you start becoming popular, and so. Some people will think, oh, I'm not doing that job. I'm not going to do that because I'm better than that. And I guess I just don't like that attitude, because it prevents us from finding who we really are. I never thought I was going to be in sports talk radio when I was growing up. Maybe a play-by-play guy, maybe a studio anchor, maybe a sports center anchor. I had all these kind of dreams of other things. I never thought about sports talk because I never heard a sports talk show that I really liked. I never heard sports talk done in a unique, creative, funny way. But because I kept saying yes, because nothing was beneath me, because I was willing to try anything, I fell into sports talk and fell in love with it. So it's important to remember not to say no to things.
Yeah. And what's one athlete who have you not had on the show that you want to have on your show?
I would love. Well, LeBron would be one. I would love to sit down with LeBron, because he's lived this extraordinary life. And when you think about it, I was just telling this to my wife the other day. She's like, when did you know that LeBron was going to be special? When did America know?
He was a junior in high school.
He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated exactly as a high schooler, junior in high school, and the title was The Chosen One. We watched his high school basketball games on the ESPN. Now, that doesn't seem so crazy now because we see some high school games on ESPN now, but at the time, we're going to watch high school basketball on ESPN? This seems so crazy in the early 2000s. To think that guy ended up becoming what LeBron is just extraordinary. And for him to never be in any trouble legally and kind of, always be a responsible adult, I just find to be one of the most extraordinary sports stories ever. So I would love to talk to LeBron long form. And probably, I just talked to Joe Montana the other day, which was a bucket item. I'd spoken to him once before, but it was very brief at the Super Bowl. This I had a little bit more time. Maybe Jim Brown as well, because Jim Brown's one of the greatest ever.
Yeah,
and I never had a chance to sit down with Jim Brown, and he's perhaps the greatest football player of all time.
Yeah, the one guy I'm trying to get on, because my grandfather loves him, I love him too, because of my grandfather telling me these stories, is Johnny Lujack, because we're a huge Notre Dame family. So, but he's like, I think he's 95 right now, so I'm trying to find like a great-grandson or something, like I did with Sammy Baugh. So, yeah. And now, I know you've interviewed Joey Gladstone, Dave Clay, or whatever his name is. So, what's one celebrity you would like to interview that you have not interviewed?
You're right. I interviewed Uncle Joey. Joey from Full House, who was played by Dave Coulier, the actor.
And he's a guy off camera that's kind of like Uncle Joey. I feel like he's a real funny guy off camera as well. So.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Well, one of my favorite TV shows ever is Seinfeld. So I would love to interview Jerry sometime because he's a big Mets fan like I am. So I would love to talk to him about the heartbreak of being a Mets fan. I think I'd also like to talk to, speaking of fellow Mets fans, Chris Rock. Chris Rock is a really thoughtful, interesting guy, really funny guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's a big sports fan as well. So we would have a certain bond about that as well. He's a Knicks fan and a Mets fan, and so I feel like he must have some commonality, in terms of knowing sports and stuff. So I think those two guys would be two of the guys that I would really love to talk to.
Yeah, it's cool. And now, what's your biggest strength and then your biggest weakness?
Well, it's always hard to self-analyze. I think my greatest strength is I feel like I'm a pretty transparent guy. I think that when you're asking me questions, I'm really trying to listen. When you're answering my questions, I'm really trying to listen. When you call up my radio show and you've got a take, I'm trying to listen. And when I speak, I hope that you're listening. And I think that creates a certain bond with the listener, that they know that I care about them and what they think and how they think and how we act. And I hope that means that the show has a certain integrity to it. And I also think my creativity is probably a difference maker because, like I said, I think the show sounds different than a lot of other radio shows. And that's great because it means that there's a signature that if you listen to the show, it's not what you're going to get anywhere else. So that's a separator. I think maybe my greatest weakness is on social media, I can get discouraged by how much negativity there is. And it sometimes colors how I feel that people are listening to the show. And, when I go on Twitter and I say something or I see something that's really negative or combative or angry, sometimes it gets stuck in my mind like, oh, but then I say that on the radio, am I eliciting that same reaction? And I don't want the show to be a place where people get angry. I want the show to be a place where people can think and laugh, and it's uplifting. But it's important to remember that what you see on social media isn't how people react every single day. It's not how people talk to one another. It's not how people interact with other things. It's its own little landmine, its own little sewer. So sometimes I probably hesitate on doing the same thing on the air as I would do on social media because I go, well, I don't want to elicit that type of negative reaction. But then I have to remember, no, that's not how radio listeners are. They might not agree, but they're not immediately going to try to call me up and try to fight me or call me names or strangle me. And it's because people's responses are different with that platform, and that's probably something that I should just always remember. There's no connection here. I shouldn't ever have to worry about that.
Yeah, and I feel like most of the people on social media, especially the ones that hate, are usually the ones that don't listen. In a sense, like, they're not like a loyal follower, and it comes to a point where most of the loyal followers, they like it, so they don't have to say anything. They just keep coming in, keep tuning in. And you have thousands of people, and only a few people, may be mad. So it's all right. We all have our haters out there. And now, I know you're a big Jets fan. So how do you? I don't know if you predicted the Jets record already. It might be on YouTube. But what do you think they will be this year?
So out of about an hour of interview that we have done, you have been flawless. However, Chris, I am not a Jets fan. I did not grow up a Jets fan. I grew up in a Giants household. My dad was a Giants fan going back to the Yankee Stadium days back in 1950s, something like that. So when I was growing up in the 80s, the Giants were great. It was Phil Simms and LT and all those great teams in the 80s winning a Super Bowl. But got a lot of friends who are big Jets fans, family members as well that are Jets fans. And I don't know about the Jets. I really like Sam Darnold. I don't like Adam Gase. The loss of Jamal Adams probably helps out the locker room, but it doesn't help on the football field. Le'Veon Bell can say that he's going to be a better Le'Veon Bell, but I don't know if I trust him to be a better Le'Veon Bell. But the Patriots aren't the Patriots anymore.
Yeah.
I think that the Jets could be close to 500. I think this could be a 7-9 or 8-8 team, but I don't think they're good enough to win the division. But I do hope that we see a season where Sam Darnold can take the next step forward because I really, really like him.
Yeah, and I know he's been doing good in training camp. I'm a Giants fan, so I like you a bit better now that you said that. Because on YouTube, I think you were arguing with somebody. His name was Joe. That's all I know.
Oh, yes.
I feel like that.
Yeah.
And you guys were,
Well,
clashing
yeah.
about the Jets. And this whole time, I looked at the comment section, and they're like, oh, well, Joe isn't a Jets fan. And they never said Damon is, but they said Joe isn't. So I just assumed you are, but happened. So, yeah, I was like, now I
Well,
like you a bit better that you said
and
the
that,
Giants.
yeah, that was a funny thing because Joe Beningo is a longtime WFAN host in New York, and he's a hardcore Jets fan. And he absolutely hated Todd Bowles when he was the head coach. And I did a spot on SNY, and I defended Todd Bowles because year one he went 10-6, and I didn't think that he was given a great roster, and the organization's always been dysfunctional. So I said it's not just Todd Bowles' fault. And Joe just jumped me when I came into the studio the next day. He ripped me up and down. I said, Joe, I mean, what are we fighting about here? I mean, it's not that big a deal, but Joe is so passionate. So it spilled out onto the radio as well. So I put together a video about that online. And Joe, being a hardcore Jets fan, really didn't like Todd Bowles. And I got to learn firsthand all about that anger.
Yeah, Bill O'Brien, that's the guy. Now, maybe not. Everybody hates Bill O'Brien now because of that whole
That's
DeAndre
right.
Hopkins.
Yeah.
So life comes at you for a circle. Now,
Right.
you mentioned Brady in Tampa. How do you think Brady's going to do in Tampa this year?
I think that we'll see some flashes of the old Tom Brady, but I don't think he leads them to an NFC Championship game or a Super Bowl. I think that's their roster's not good enough for that. Their defense certainly isn't good enough for that. But they'll put up some decent numbers. I think, though, that we'll see some moments in games, too, where he looks 43 years old. We saw him looking kind of 42 at times last year, specifically the AFC wildcard game against the Titans. So I think we're going to see some moments where we do see a Tom Brady that looks a little mortal this year.
Yeah, and what's sad is Tom Brady's last Patriots throw went to the Titans, so to Logan Ryan's hands, ex-teammate of his. Now, wrapping up here, who's the biggest underachievers and then who's the biggest overachievers?
In terms of the NFL? Or
Yeah, NFL.
In the NFL? As far as a team goes, the biggest underachievers are the Rams. The Rams have all this money wrapped up into all these players, and for them to miss the playoffs last year after making the Super Bowl was a huge downgrade. And the biggest overachievers, let's see, the Dolphins. The Dolphins were trying to tank early in the year last year,
and they got good.
The roster was ripped to shreds. And then look how they finished. Look at what their head coach helped lead them to. Look at them beating the Patriots in Week 17 on the road. I had a lot of respect for how they were coached because they were supposed to do nothing last year, and they ended up as a team that was really competitive in the final 8 weeks of the season.
Yeah, and Brian Flores, the coach, I mean, he's one of Belichick's finest, so he's doing good for himself there. And he was like a linebackers coach, and then took a head coaching role. You just don't see that. But since he was under Bill Belichick, years of pain and misery for the Dolphins, although they did good against them.
Beating the Patriots in Week 17 on the road, I had a lot of respect for how they were coached because they were supposed to do nothing last year, and they ended up as a team that was really competitive in the final 8 weeks of the season.
Yeah, and Brian Flores, the coach, I mean, he's one of Belichick's finest, so he's doing good for himself there. And he was like a linebackers coach, and then took a head coaching role. You just don't see that. But since he was under Bill Belichick, years of pain and misery for the Dolphins, although they did good against them. With that whole, what was it, Miami Miracle? But, yeah, they decided to get the guy that kept on beating them. And now, lastly, just define happiness.
Chris, you're good. This is such a good question. This is a question that I love asking other people. I think happiness is finding your purpose in life, something that you wake up every day and makes you happy. Now, maybe that's your job. That's my job for me. I'm so thrilled to do my job every single day. Maybe that's your spouse. Maybe that's your kids. Maybe that's where you live. Maybe that's just your style of life. But finding the thread to happiness is finding what it is every day that you wake up and you're excited for. What is the purpose? And that happiness is in many ways a choice. Now, a lot of people have difficult backgrounds. A lot of people have a lot of hurdles put in their way. We don't know all those hurdles. We don't know all the background. That's why anger on social media or yelling at one another on cable news or whatever is it's just so bad for us because we don't know where everybody else is coming from. We don't know what their history is. But I had a friend of mine named Mo Gaba, who was your age, actually, 14 years old, and he was diagnosed with cancer at a very early age. He was blind because of it and battled cancer his entire life. But he woke up every day and he was thrilled. He was happy. He had friends. He had his beloved Baltimore Orioles and Ravens. He would call up Sports Talk Radio. He would call up my show as well, and he was always so happy. And it taught me that it didn't matter what you had, didn't matter what you had surrounded yourself with in terms of things that you bought or a big house or whatever, that you always had the choice that if you wanted to flip the switch and say, no, I got it good, you could. And little Mo did that. So I think happiness is realizing what you love, what makes you happy, and then focusing on that, because what's the use in focusing on the things that make you angry, right? Why bother? You don't have to do it, so don't do it.
Yeah, and it's like what you said about social media, and I saw little Mo, sadly passed away, so I'm sorry, because I know you were close with him, so I'm sorry for your loss, and it seemed like he made the best of everything, so that, looks like a good kid right there.
No doubt, and I appreciate you saying that, but you're absolutely right. I mean, this is a young man that for 14 years was given every reason to be angry or sad or negative or cynical, and he never took the bait. He never would do that. He just was focusing on what made him happy. And listen, because all of us hit something that makes us disappointed or makes us upset, or makes us frustrated. A bad test grade, somebody in school doesn't like us, you get the wrong job, you get passed over for a job, the girl that you like doesn't like you, the guy that you like doesn't like you. Something happens every single day that annoys you, and you could focus on that. Or you could focus on the things in your life that you actually are happy about. You could focus on, if you wanted to, the things that were good, because everybody's got something good. And Mo was the best symbol of that, and I'll never forget that lesson from him, and I try to live by that all the time.
Yeah, and it's amazing, and that's about all I have for you, Damon, and I thank you for joining. I don't know if you have a podcast, so do you have, does the radio show turn into a podcast, because I know they're popular nowadays?
Yeah, our radio show is available on podcast, so for anybody that doesn't have CBS Sports Radio in their listening area, or we're on Sirius XM, channel 206 as well, so we have Sirius XM. You can also stream us on your phone. You just search the DA show. But if you want to listen to the podcast, you can listen on demand. So if you can't catch it live 6 to 10 in the morning every single morning, Eastern time, just search the DA show on your podcast platform. We're on all of them. And you can check out the show and
check out the Nomad Series too. I'll put everything in the description. I'll put all the links.
I think there's 80 episodes of my travels across the country and the world, traveling to see sports and eating cool stuff and drinking cool stuff and meeting cool people.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you asked me about what do I think is the definition of happiness, because Nomad is one of those things where traveling is one of the things that makes me really happy. And traveling to go see games and meet new people is inspiring to me. So Nomad is kind of a happiness project for myself.
Yeah, after I get my license, given my parents kind of give me the all right, you can go, maybe with a few friends. I want to go, rent an RV, go around the country. But along the way, just see a bunch of stadiums. That's the goal. So people call me crazy. Oh, you're just doing it for sports. I like to travel, and I like sports. So it's the perfect 1-2 combo. And now with this, I know.
We are from the same cloth, Chris, because when I was growing up and we had these summer vacations, we would load up the Chevy Suburban, me and my brother and my sister, my dad and my mom would drive so far to go on summer vacation here, there, and I would always take the map and say, hey, why don't we take this route? And it was always to pass by the stadium. And I remember, I got to pass by what was then the Georgia Dome. Wow, look at that. I could have passed by Comiskey Field with the lights on. Wow, Comiskey Park. How about that? Oh, wow, we could pass by this stadium and that stadium. I remember very vividly driving through these cities and saying, let's take this route to go see the stadium. And I was just driving by it, but I know the feeling very well. It is it's the type of thing that when you get your freedom and you can go choose where your own adventure, you're going to go see a lot of them.
Yeah, the one in Miami for David Beckham's team, and then Las Vegas' new stadium for the Raiders. Those are the two big ones I want to see, and then I'll see whatever I can out of that. So, Damon, thank you for joining the show, and I had a blast talking to you. This was probably the most fun I've had doing one of these interviews. And I have fun on everyone, but this was just really cool talking to you, especially a guy I've watched on TV for years. So, Damon, I wish you all the best with your show and with your health and everything going on in this, earth today. So, thank you, Damon.
Chris, you are amazing. This was such a good interview. I do this for a living, and you ask all the right questions, and you have all the good information, and you know what you're talking about, and you're easy to talk to, and you're going to be doing this for a really long time. So my only request is thank you for having me on the show. When you are in the job force, please, if you are going to come to take the DA show over, just let me be a producer, update anchor, intern, whatever. I will happily work for you if you're coming for the job, okay?
Yeah, thank you. And, we should stay in touch throughout this. it's great to, talk to somebody like you, because somebody who's doing something I would, want to do in the future or something. So, yeah, Damon?
Yeah, whatever you need, Chris, I'm happy to help you out in whatever I can, but you are on a path to stardom. This was very impressive, my man. Very, very impressive. Great job.
Yes, all the best, and everybody, Chris Dailey and the DA signing off from the Sports Court. See y'all later.